Good morning, ladies and gents. Scientists, or good afternoon, depending on what time of the day you are watching this. Today's scientists, we are doing a lab on variation with pinto beans. The title of the lab is, Do Other Species Have Variation? And if so, why is it important? You have probably heard the expression as similar as two peas in a pod. But are they really? To us, the difference between humans are obvious, but we may be less sure about the differences within other species. Such differences between individuals within a species are known as variations. A good way to reveal any patterns that may exist is to observe traits that can be measured or counted and graph them. In this investigation, you will look for and measure differences in the organism Phaseolus vulgaris, or the pinto bean. You will then use Google Sheets to graph your results for each trait to show the extent of variation and to see if there are any common patterns. You will then be asked to think about why the variation exists and if the possible side effects that certain variations might have on the organism's abilities to survive. Your materials are virtual, and you're going to be measuring 10 pinto beans with a virtual millimeter ruler, and then you're also going to be using a calculator. Collecting data procedure. Pinto beans. Number 1, randomly select a pinto bean. Number 2, use the millimeter ruler below to measure the longest distance across the bean hot dog style. Round to the nearest whole or half number. For example, 2, 3.5, 4.5, 6, etc. Record the values in your data table below. Then measure halfway across the bean to find the radius, half the hamburger style. Round to the nearest whole or half number. Record the values in your data table. Number 4, calculate the volume of the bean and record it in your data table. Number 5, for each bean you choose, approximate the percentage of dark coloring and record it in your data table. For our purposes, we will round up to the nearest 10, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, and so on and so forth. In this data table is where you will be recording for your 10 different beans. Remember, the width is the length of the bean, so hot dog style, and the radius is half the short way or the hamburger style of the bean. Then you will be doing this calculation, for which there's another video, for volume equals the width times pi times the radius squared. Excuse me. In table 2, you will be doing your estimate of the percentage of dark coloring on the bean. And remember, you want to round to the nearest 10%. So 0%, 10%, 20%, 30%, all the way up to 100%. Depending on your bean. The next step, you will construct a graph using Google Sheets. Go to sheets.google.com and open a new sheet. Copy and paste only the volume column from Table 1 into Google Sheets. In Google Sheets, highlight all the data, including the column name. At the top, select Insert Chart. A histogram should appear. Copy your graph and paste underneath the title below. Repeat to make another histogram for the bean coloring. Here is where you will post your first histogram on volume. Here is where you will post your second histogram on bean coloring. Then I am collecting all the class data, or Miss K is collecting all the class data, and we will get you the class histograms for our overall data. After you have all the data, you will be working on the discussion questions. Number 1, study your graphs, the histograms, and see if you can find a pattern. What patterns emerge from the graphs? Number 2, the eye of every bean actually contains a tiny embryo of a new baby pinto bean plant. The rest of the bean is packed full of nutrients like protein, fiber, and vitamins. This filling is what nourishes a newly sprouting embryo until it sprouts above the surface and can produce food on its own. Although providing nutrients for the embryo is a priority, it takes a lot of time and energy to make these nutrients. A, Is there an advantage to a large seed volume variation? Is there a disadvantage to a small seed? Explain each question. You'll explain the advantages and the disadvantages. Part B. Do you think a baby pinto bean embryo always needs all the food stored in the parent bean? Explain. Part C. Might any of the beans we measured have more food than they need? Part D. What might be a disadvantage of having a large bean? Part E. Excuse me. What size do you think is about optimal for a bean? That is, it provides enough food for the baby plant to survive under most circumstances, but not so much so that there's food left over and wasted. Use your histogram to make this prediction. Number 3, considering the coloring of the bean. Without the help of humans, beans naturally fall on the soil where they will sprout. The light coloring helps the bean blend into the soil and not get eaten by scavengers. However, in order for a bean to grow, it has to absorb sunlight. Have you ever worn a dark shirt on a hot day versus a light-colored shirt? There's a big difference in the amount of heat that you feel, right? Same for the bean. Beans typically grow best in warm, direct sunlight, and the dark colors help them absorb the necessary heat better. A. What is an advantage of dark coloring? What would be a potential disadvantage? Please answer both questions. B. What is the advantage of light coloring? What is a potential disadvantage? C. What coloring pattern would you expect most beans to be based on this information? Does it match what you see in your graph? Thank you, scientists. I hope you have fun with this lab and getting all your information down correctly. And I hope that you have a great day.